America wants to import Canadian prescription drugs. I'm Marco Perri. Welcome to the Perri platform. Today, America admits to having a problem, and at the same time, they don't try to fix it. At least not fix it at the grassroots level. According to the National Post, the Trump administration announced this week that they are planning to put forward a proposal to allow American citizens to legally import cheaper prescription drugs from Canada. My first emotional response to this announcement was to ask, why? The American pharmaceutical industry is really a mess for most Americans. The drug companies have been largely left to their own devices, and you can see the results of that in terms of pricing. They are literally robbing their patients with extremely high margins, and nobody can do anything about that. In 2019 alone, pharmaceutical companies passed price increases on 250 prescription drugs. These weren't minor increases either. They weren't just to keep up with inflation. They were dastardly high, meant to gouge consumers. Blood pressure medication rose by 30%. Morphine products rose by 10%. 25 other drugs from Allergan, one of the companies, just that, 25 drugs alone from them, rose by 9.5%, and a swath of other medication also experienced massive increases. Now, imagine how insane these increases are when drug companies ramp up their prices frequently. It's not a rare occasion. These increases compound, and before you know it, you are in debt to get simple prescription medication to keep yourself healthy and alive. The issue with prescription drugs is the product is non-elastic. In other words, the demand is not severely impacted by price or income of the purchaser. These drugs are not luxury products. In many cases, they are needed. And I don't mean needed in the sense where a 12-year-old needs a cell phone. Whether you are rich or poor, you need your medication or you risk further falling into illness, not being able to treat yourself, and, in the worst case, dying. This spells a situation where companies do not have a reasonable cap on how much they can charge you. If Apple made their iPhone $25,000, consumers would logically stop buying iPhones. If drug companies band together and collectively raise prices of blood pressure medication by 30% year after year, what are you going to do? You're going to still buy the medication. This is why special consideration needs to be given to these prescription industries. Generally, I'm a believer in the free market system, but not when it comes to life or death products that are inelastic. All the bargaining power is handed to the pharmaceutical companies. The answer here is the government either has to set a fair range of prices that the companies have to abide by, or they can set a limit on the yearly price hikes. Drugs that are newer and cost more to produce, maybe those should have some more leeway. This way, the companies aren't completely disincentivized to innovate, but for things that have been around for so long, like these blood pressure medications, there is no reason for companies to be jacking up the prices in the ways that they currently do. Another solution is the government can become a supplier themselves. The government's going to purchase the prescription medication in bulk from the producer and then pass those savings on to the citizens. If they're feeling extra generous, maybe even take a hit to provide things at even more affordable prices. Now, this crosses over into very controversial territory, as Americans are not fond of that system, but the first two things I mentioned, those can suffice. The bottom line is something has to be done, and clearly there is a problem. What does the American government do after realizing that? Announce that their citizens can buy drugs from Canada because they are too high domestically. That's a terrible solution, and it is a definition of a band-aid. First of all, it is openly admitting that they have a problem. Second, it is actively trying to push the problem onto another country. Third, it has the potential to cripple Canada's ability to attain and supply drugs to their own citizens. This is really a silly approach. Instead of taking responsibility and cleaning up shop within your own space, you want to pawn off the issue. Canadian officials say they were not even consulted in advance about these details of the proposition put forward by the American government. That's another red flag. Not even giving a heads up to the country you plan on siphoning product from. It's not a good look. The volunteer chairman of the Best Medicines Coalition lays out clearly that this move endangers Canadians. His exact quote is, "The existing supply of drugs in Canada is not always sufficient to even meet the current needs of Canadians, let alone a sudden surge in demand from south of the border." That is exactly right. He also points out the federal government may not be suitably equipped to act on this right now. Why is that? And he's talking about the Canadian federal government in that. Because Parliament is on a recess, aka they're taking a 2-month-long summer vacation. This aspect of government has always stumped me. The world does not stop turning while you are out of office. Maybe you can stop Canada from accomplishing anything, but the rest of the world, they're going to be making moves, and this right here is the downside of that. It's a massive break, 2 months, and it cripples the democratic process. Of course, these people and representatives are just that, people. They're human, but at the same time, this is what they signed up for. It is their job. Maybe a couple weeks off here and there, but right now, you're seeing the full foolishness of the length of these breaks. Something is happening, and the government may not even be able to respond to it. On top of all this, how many jobs realistically even get 2 months of vacation a year? Not that many, I would wager. Maybe teachers? These guys definitely need to take less time off. People are suggesting that Parliament be recalled before the October election to establish a plan to protect Canadians. That seems pretty logical, and from my perspective, it literally has to happen. That's the only way that things are going to be better for Canada. If they don't do that, if these politicians prioritize their vacation over defending citizens from an impending drug shortage, they all need to be voted out regardless of party affiliation in the next election. It will demonstrate a lack of integrity, lack of respect, and a lack of duty for their current post. It's unacceptable. The representatives need to get back together and put forward legislation to either only sell leftover drugs to America or introduce heavy tariffs that heavily favor domestic citizens. If they let things run their course, they have failed at their jobs. Canada is only 1/10 the size of America. In what realm are we equipped to supply both ourselves and them? America is the country with the capacity here, but they lack the nerve to challenge the pharmaceutical industry. Maybe that's for good reason. They put a lot of money into government. They have a lot of lobbyists. They have a lot of power. There might not be a way right now to get rid of them, but at the same time, that's another one of my issues with the current government system. Money and politics is a dangerous game because, as you see here, invested interests that are underneath the table, not publicly visible, sometimes rise to the surface, and those interests supersede those of the citizens. It doesn't make much sense because the citizens are the ones who actually voted for these politicians, but the politicians need their money to, first of all, run sometimes, and second, get enough constituents to hold the job. It's not a good scenario, and as a result, we're seeing things like this where people can stand up to obvious perpetrators of the system. At the end of the day, it is painfully clear that an issue exists. The states need to tackle it on their own soil. We can help them facilitate that change. I'm not saying leave them out in the cold, but giving them free access to our entire supply of prescription drugs, it's not a solution. Get these politicians back in office and vote on some restrictions as soon as possible. While they're at it, maybe pass a motion to cut their vacation down as well, because that's also ridiculous. Maybe that second part is a little bit of daydreaming on my side, but as I've said, the Americans have drastic problems. At the same time, Canada has issues of their own. I would love to see us tackle them together. That is what communication is for. That's what an action plan is for. That is what alliances are for. If we can somehow come up with a way to mandate drug companies on a North American basis, buy drugs in bulk for all countries here, that will produce a massive savings that we can pass on to the consumers. We can all reap the benefits. The common theme here is that government has to intervene in some capacity. These companies cannot be left to their own devices anymore. It has become so clear, but still, they're not doing anything about it. And that's what's so weird to me about the situation. They openly acknowledge, yeah, we have a problem. Americans cannot afford drugs. So what do? Let them buy from Canada. No, it does not address your issue. It's a band-aid. Fix your problem so your own citizens do not need to buy from Canada. That should be the ultimate goal here. I hope to see in the coming weeks a plan to, first of all, counter America's proposal, and at the same time, maybe an offer to tackle the issue collectively for our mutual benefit. Think about it. As it was said in the article, sometimes Canada lacks supply. Well, America has supply. America lacks cheap prices. Well, Canada has cheap prices. It seems like a mutually beneficial arrangement can be had there. So, let's figure something out. The answer isn't to give them access to our supply though. That would quite literally destroy both of our countries. I don't think anyone wants that. So, politicians, put your foot down, but at the same time, let's figure something out. So that's about it for today. Thanks for joining me on the Perri platform. If you enjoy the content, be sure to leave a review and follow me on Twitter at Perri Platform. I'll see you soon.